Now Britannia at the Opera, introduced by Roderic Dunnett.
In these days when a major new opera, such as Harrison Birtwistle's Gawain, may be judged a success on only a handful of performances, it really does seem extraordinary that an opera managing a continuous run of 5 months could possibly be deemed anything but a triumph. Sir Arthur Sullivan's Ivanhoe was just that. The Gondoliers was still in full swing at the Savoy when Ivanhoe inaugurated Richard D'Oyly-Carte's Royal English Opera House in January 1891. But this riskier operatic project soon ran into financial trouble. Within a year, the scheme had collapsed. It was that which flopped, not Ivanhoe. But Sullivan's opera itself, with Queen Victoria as both inspirer and dedicatee, remained a remarkable achievement, especially when one recalls he was dogged by ill health and by simmering rows with his old partner, W.S. Gilbert. There were other problems. How Wagnerian should post-Wagner opera be? And could Sullivan introduce a scene of comic light relief without being accused of importing Savoy onto the serious stage? The young Arthur Sullivan did not lack musical training. His formative years in Leipzig laid the foundations for scores such as The Prodigal Son and The Golden Legend, which had a marked impact on the English oratorio circuit. Some claim that the famous operettas squandered his talents, and he too sensed they were sapping his creativity. In the end, as grand opera, Ivanhoe proved a mixed bag. Despite its large orchestra, the 3-act, 9-scene framework seems rather static in places. Some, like Debussy, likened it to Massenet. The Times was complimentary, though itemized some drawbacks, and even George Bernard Shaw, for all his backbiting, focused on its fustian libretto, which debased and gutted Scott's noble original. Yet despite moments of lesser inspiration, there is no doubting Ivanhoe does contain elements of Sullivan's most impressive, and indeed finest, serious music. Perhaps the opera really does deserve taking down and dusting. With the first blasts of the overture, we find ourselves in Rotherwood Hall, ancestral home of Cedric, a Saxon thane, who laments King Richard's absence as the realm of England falls under the thieving Norman jackboot, and regrets he's been forced to exile his son, young Wilfrid of Ivanhoe, for falling in love with Rowena, his father's ward, who is of untainted royal Saxon blood. Amid the wassail, enter Isaac of York, a kindly Jew, seeking shelter with his daughter Rebecca. No sooner are the newcomers seated at Cedric's table than enter 2 distinctly unsavoury visitors, both Knights Templar, de Bracy and Brian de Bois-Guilbert. Would Sullivan have called him Gilbert? They're both back from the Crusades, and act as if they own the place. All are on their way to join Prince John at the royal tournament at the castle of Ashby-de-la-Zouche, a fine piece of English heritage even in those days. The knights soon fall to comparing the feminine delights of Oriental Jew and Gentile ladies. Fairest of all, declares de Bracy, sung here by Alex Morrison, is Rowena, and on her appearance they embarrass her with their lavish courtly praise. Cedric, sung by Keith Latham, shrewdly interrupts with a rumbustious toast, at first to Saxon pride, and then to all crusaders, Saxon and Norman alike, in which the knights and chorus join.
of heroes long ago, those who fight and those who fall where battles ebb and flow. Well do I mind the day when I have seen the armies in array, and the earth shook with horsemen, and the sword leapt from the scabbard at my arm and side, and loud the ravens brave or poor or lord, drink to the warrior's noble mood, the battle's glory and the minstrel's song. But now on me drawn is the ancient fame, and fair warriors throng, the Saxon glory and the Saxon name. Then fill the cup, fill high, fill the cup, fill high, and drink to those who strive and those who die. Saxon or Norman fighting for the cause, glory to those who fight for the true cross. Glory to those who battle for the cause, and those to those the bravest and the best. Wonder of land and sea, of east and west, knights of the holy order of the fair. Glory to those who fight the fair, who win the prize of Bring them, bring them. Fill the cup, fill high, fill the cup, fill high. Glory to those who battle for the cross, glory to those who fight for the true cross. Glory to those who fight for the
Ah, them were the days. But a plot is in the hatching, for these two nasty pieces of work secretly planned to seize Rowena after the joust at Ashby and avenge themselves on the upstart Saxons. Now that's what you call being an appreciative guest. Alone in an antechamber, Rowena, sung here by Susan Bullock, gazes at the moon and, borne aloft on an accompaniment of flutes and strings, sings poignantly of her absent Ivanhoe, whom she imagines far away in Mediterranean lands. On cue, enter the Palmer, none other than Ivanhoe, who has returned in disguise from abroad. He's sung here by Anthony Roden. Rowena has gathered that the Palmer met Ivanhoe in the East. "Tell me about him," she begs, "that I may have some hope." And he duly obliges.
some sorrow at the heart.
Is he not happy then?
Ah, what know I? Perchance. Forgive me if I speak too bold. Thou knowest best his chance of happiness.
God keep him safe.
unlock my spirit upwards brings, and with quick pulsing wings beats the still air to music. Oh, my heart beats not too wild for thinking of my dear. But if we two must part for day or week or year, yet I know, my dear, love loveth me, my dear love loveth me. And happy shall we be ere death grows old, and life be ended here.
That disguise of Ivanhoe's is certainly paying him dividends, for Rowena has just let slip that she does secretly love him. Scene 3 takes us to the lists at Ashby, where the challengers, led by a mysterious Black Knight, in fact King Richard in disguise, have been doing rather well, mopping up one cocky Norman jouster after another. Prince John, who is presiding, has received secret word that his brother King Richard has escaped French captivity. Enter a fresh young knight, a total unknown, whose motto, Il Desdichado, he who has fallen on ill luck, proclaims that he's disinherited. Who is he? And whom will he challenge? Whisper the excited crowd, and by jingo, he goes and strikes the shield hanging outside the tent of Bois Guilbert. That takes courage, some might call it provocation. Trumpets sound and combat is joined. High drama, who will be unhorsed and who triumph, before Prince John, sung here by Stephen Gadd, bids Rowena, as pageant queen, remove the winner's helmet and award the tournament crown.
St. Dunstan. The gallant Bois Guilbert was first unhorsed. I hear by name the nameless knight, the victor in Alice. And now, Sir Conqueror, fulfill thy knightly duty, 'tis thy his helmet, heralds, bareheaded must he take the crown.
Act 1 thus draws to a thrilling climax. Norman nobles and Saxon crowd alike recognise the disinherited Ivanhoe returned from exile. But who else, wonders Prince John, may have returned with him? Act 2 finds us in the forest at Copmanhurst, where King Richard, sung by Stephen Holloway, has now taken refuge with Friar Tuck, sung by Keith Latham, whom he met while exchanging a barrage of insults at the joust. Horizontally challenged Friar and his disguised liege duly sup together on venison poached from the royal estates, before they engage in competition, at first not of arms, but of minstrelsy. His Majesty tunes up, and off he goes a-strumming.
I ask no wealth, nor courtier's grace that woos a weary king. If I may ride the woodland way and breathe the air of spring, the air of spring. An ashen spear in strong right hand, good horse between the knees. What treasure can a king command, or glorious and rich? What treasure can a king command, more glorious than these? More glorious than these. I rouse me with the dawn's first light, and breast the shadowed hill. I know the forest's deep delight when all the leaves are still. There would I bend with peace below, to woo the nut-brown maid, and see her blushes come and go, and see her blushes come and go beneath the dappled shade.
Not bad, says Friar Tuck, the human rotunda, and he obliges with his own song, one of the best-known chunks of the entire opera.
The wind blows cold across the moor, with driving rain and rending tree. It smites the pious hermit's door, but not the judge cares he, for close he sits within and makes his merry din. Close he sits within and makes his merry din. With his old jolly Jenkin, I spy a knave in drinking, and drawl the brown bowl to me. Then old jolly Jenkin, I spy a knave in drinking, and drawl the bonny bowl to me. The wind a roaring song may he sing, in crashing wood or frighted town. It whirls the mantle of a king as 'twere a beggar's gown, but caring not a jot we sing and rain the pot. Caring not a jot we sing and rain the pot. With his old jolly Jenkin, I spy a knave in drinking, and drawl the brown bowl to me. Then old jolly Jenkin, I spy a knave in drinking, and drawl the bonny bowl to me.
Jolly, stirring stuff. Was he once a member of the King's Navee, do you think? Needless to say, there were a few distinctly merry men joining in. Suddenly, enter Robin of Locksley, Robin Hood, of course, sung by Declan McCusker, who brings word that Cedric and Rowena have been seized by visored knaves and abducted to de Bracy's hideout at Torquilstone. Worse still, Ivanhoe has been seized as well, while travelling with Rebecca and Isaac. The king's blood is up. Ivanhoe taken? They'd better watch out. Scene 2 finds us in a dungeon, where Cedric and Rowena are confronted by de Bracy. To their horror, he claims Prince John's authority to marry Rowena and blackmails them by threatening death to the imprisoned Ivanhoe. A powerful trio develops before the other knight, Bois Guilbert, enters. This Templar's lascivious eyes are focused elsewhere, on the dark Jewess, Rebecca, and Templars are used to getting their own way. What we now hear, sung by Stephen Gadd, is surely one of the most powerful moments of the opera.
Thou thy snowflake, till she meant for thee another and a wilder bliss be mine, my lovely Jewess. She has drawn a spell about my heart, and when close a set of sun. These are his mine. These are his mine. And mine, a tyrant's mood. And I will woo her as the lion woos, to bring his wild mixed foes I'll to his side. And I will win her as the lion wins, that in the desert seeks his tawny bride. I will woo her, I will win her, I will woo and win her as the lion woos and wins. O maid of Judah, trembling in my arms, proud is thy fate to own my conquering sword. O hell opposed with all its spiral arms, this hour is mine, this hour is mine, and I, thy Lord, thy ruthless Lord. If death be host, I'll drain his cup for wine. Come night, come death, so this mine heart
Proof that when Sir Arthur gets stuck into grand opera, he really can score. Nor has Sullivan done yet, for awaiting Bois Guilbert is the unfortunate object of his unsought attentions. High in a turret chamber, the Jewess Rebecca, sung by Tinuke Olufimihan, contemplates the terrible drop below, and sings a moving prayer to Jehovah to protect her in her tribulation, a tune that Sullivan admitted he borrowed straight from the synagogue.
God
Poor lovely girl. Bois Guilbert enters, but he has no intention of making an honest woman of Rebecca. She is the captive of his bow and spear. Old habits die hard. Even as she threatens to cast herself from the window, the Templar rashly reveals his wild ambition. He will usurp headship of the order himself and make her Queen of the Orient. Is he mad? Is he power-crazed? And can he possibly let her live, having uttered such treasonable thoughts? Just in time, a summons sounds at the gate. It is the King and Robin of Locksley come to free the captives. Bois Guilbert retreats to answer the summons, leaving Rebecca's voice soaring once more in lofty prayer. As the morning light steals into Ivanhoe's prison chamber, he gazes out and thinks of his beloved Rowena. Thank goodness he's an optimist.
But let me
Even as Ivanhoe dreams of Rowena, Rebecca, who is nursing him, has fallen for her patient. Alas, poor Rebecca's case is hopeless. Unable to win his affection, she must content herself with describing for him the great battle outside, Templars v. King Richard and friends in Lincoln Green. Suddenly the vile Bois Guilbert appears and drags Rebecca away with him as the castle goes up in flames. Ivanhoe and the king are reunited, and Ivanhoe's father relents. But one score remains to be settled. In the final scene, we remove to the precinct at Templestowe, where Bois Guilbert has taken Rebecca and had her condemned by the Grand Order of Knights Templar as a witch. Her father arrives to beg Ivanhoe's help. Only a champion can save her, and Ivanhoe, not one to buck a challenge, hurtles off to the fray. The finale builds to a terrific climax as Gilbert and Ivanhoe engage in mortal combat. Finally, to our utter relief, not that we're partisan, of course, the grisly Gilbert falls dead, and the hapless Rebecca is saved. These Templars really are the last straw, and King Richard summons their Grand Master, sung by David Morrison, and banishes them forthwith from English soil. Law and order are restored, and all good men and true, not to mention their good ladies, applaud their royal master.
Traitorous knight, and at your peril shame our cause no more. And dost thou banish me? The temples and the kings, we will appeal to Rome. Appeal. But if I find thee yet on English ground, I will so harry thee, thou foreign knight, that thou shalt have no voice to plead in Rome. See where the banner of England floats afar above thy temple pennants. Why does the temple stand to mourn?
In those highlights from Ivanhoe by Sir Arthur Sullivan, the title role was sung by Anthony Roden. Stephen Holloway sang the part of King Richard I, and Stephen Gadd, the Templar and Prince John, with Susan Bullock as Rowena, Tinuke Olufimihan as Rebecca, and Keith Latham doubling as Friar Tuck and Ivanhoe's father, Cedric. De Bracy was Alex Morrison, Robin of Locksley, Declan McCusker, the Herald, Jonathan Hawkins, and the role of the Grandmaster was sung by David Morrison, with the BBC Scottish Symphony Orchestra and the Chorus of Scottish Opera conducted by Martin Brabbins. And Scotland is, appropriately, where we find ourselves next week, the Hamish MacCunn's opera Jeanie Deans, also based on a novel by Sir Walter Scott and first heard in Edinburgh in 1894. I do hope you'll join me then.
And you can join Roderic Dunnett for Britannia at the Opera, again next Monday lunchtime at the same time, 12 noon. Well, while we've a few moments in hand before the 1 o'clock news, here's my colleague Peter Jefferson with details of an opera series coming up on Radio 4.
Mozart's Cursi fan tutte, one of the classic operas known the world over, but spare a thought for the great opera houses where these works are performed. From La Scala Milan to the Met in New York, if the walls could sing, would they tell a story? Well, this Wednesday on Radio 4, in a new series, the conductor Jane Glover explores behind the scenes of 6 renowned and glamorous opera houses.
I wanted to make this series really because I work in opera houses a lot and I have observed really from within the different people who contribute to making this enormous wheel turn, many of whom are not ever seen by the public. And I think the regular opera goers would be interested to hear about people they simply never know about. But even if you're not a regular opera goer, I think it's not unlike looking at a big company like IBM, except it sounds much nicer. I think probably the people are more interesting.
And there are some hair-raising revelations.
At the Met, for instance, the wig mistress told me how when Pavarotti's in, he always goes home in his wig and sends it back the following morning in a taxi with his secretary. For some reason, he feels he can't actually take it off in the theatre, but he has to go home in it. I thought that was rather charming. Of course, the wardrobe department in the Met is incredibly impressive. They've got literally thousands of costumes actually in the building. And the same with the wig department, and one can just sort of walk through these corridors and see these boxes saying Jessie Norman and Graziella Sciutti and Kurt Moll, and this sort of list of operatic history is sitting there in boxes, and in fact it's just wigs, it's heads. It's quite sort of curious. It's sort of Madame Tussauds without faces.
Jane Glover explores the history and the future of 6 of the world's greatest opera houses in a new series on Radio 4 for Wednesday nights, beginning this week at 9:15.
Well, at midday tomorrow on Radio 3, you can hear Music Restored. This week it's the 4th programme in our series, The Song of the Angels, and Andrew Carwood directs the Cardinals' music in music which explores the veneration of Mary, the Mother of Jesus. Chris D'Souza presents Music Restored, which you can hear tomorrow at midday or tonight at 11:30. And earlier this evening there's another concert in the New Wave series recorded last autumn at St George's, Brandon Hill in Bristol. Chris D'Souza talks to the composer Adrian Jack, who for many years has been promoting contemporary music at the ICA concert series in London. Now he's devoting more time to his own work, and tonight you can hear his piano trio, played by the Joachim Trio of Rebecca Hirsch, Caroline Durnley and John Lennon. And Adrian's chosen to surround his piece with some French trimmings, short pieces by Fauré, and to end with Ravel's magnificent piano trio. That's New Waves, starting this evening at 10 to 10 here on Radio 3. BBC Radio 3. It's just coming up to 1 o'clock, and this is Fiona Talkington in London with a summary of the news. The Chancellor, Kenneth Clarke, has told European finance ministers in Brussels that he doesn't believe it's a practical proposition to enter into monetary union before 1999 at the earliest. Unlike some of his cabinet colleagues, Mr. Clark appeared to accept the inevitability of a single currency. He said technical work on preparations for a single currency should continue, and Britain would play a constructive part in that. Sinn Féin says 6 of its members in Londonderry have been arrested and taken for questioning by the RUC. They're said to include a city councillor and a member of the Forum for Peace and Reconciliation, which meets in Dublin. The Democratic Unionists have said they believe the Anglo-Irish framework document will prove, when published, to be even worse from a unionist perspective than had been previously envisaged. At the launch of the DUP's alternative proposals, which call for an election to a new Northern Ireland convention, the deputy leader Peter Robinson said he resented the implication that unionists were taking a negative attitude towards the peace process. Police in Bradford, hunting the killer of a 7-year-old boy and his 15-year-old babysitter, have made a fresh appeal for help. They've narrowed down the timescale in which Jonathan Copley and Rachel Rooney were stabbed to death. They now believe the children were murdered between 9:30 and just after midnight on Saturday night. 7 road protesters who are trying to stop the extension of the M65 in Lancashire have been arrested. Bailiffs had been sent in to evict demonstrators from a row of cottages which stand in the way of the M65 extension near Blackburn. Others have barricaded themselves into a concrete bunker. A woman from North Devon is considering legal action against her local supermarket after she bit into an apple containing a syringe needle. Maurice Tipper from Barnstable needed hospital treatment after eating the French apple. In the city a short time ago, the 100 share index was down 26 points at 30.19. And the weather. Rain will spread to most of England and Wales. Scotland and Northern Ireland will have heavy, wintry showers. And that's the news and weather. The time coming up to 2.5 minutes past 1. And it's time now for this week's BBC Lunchtime Concert from St John's, Smith Square. Here's Donald MacLeod.
Hello. This week, we're delighted to welcome to St John's the Netherlands Wind Ensemble. They've been going strong for over 30 years now. They really made their mark with recordings of Mozart's music for winds. That's what brought them together in the first place. Like any ensemble, there are periodic changes of personnel, and about 6 years ago, this one took on a new lease of life with an injection of fresh young talent. All the players are young principals from the leading Dutch orchestras, including the Rotterdam Philharmonic and the Royal Concertgebouw Orchestra. The new generation has built on the reputation of their predecessors, and they offer a different style of programming which puts together the familiar favourites of the repertoire with new music. Today's recital at St John's is a case in point. They're going to play an arrangement for wind of Beethoven's 7th Symphony, and before that, a new piece, specially written for them by the Georgian composer Gia Cancelli.